This is the Business Byte segment, and this is something that I do with every podcast where we just do things as either tutorials to help other bands or labels. This is Winter Solace. I'm the owner of Winter Solace Productions in the United States, and it's an underground black metal label. I have been doing this for almost 20 years, and I have a lot of information or stuff that I want to be able to put out there for people in either this space or other spaces, as some of this overlaps, because there's a lot of stuff out there that isn't really known. Now, for the people streaming the entire podcast, what you just listened to was something from this Spectral Night Underground Revenge. It's a CD I just released that a lot of the feedback for that is coming in way late, but it's positive, and I suspect that that'll be something that does go somewhere. But that's what I wanted to talk about with this segment is I deal with a lot of bands like that are fairly new, that don't have a lot of experience, are unknown, because the guy originally asked me to release that onto LP, and how it was presented to me as something that couldn't even get manufactured. And I obviously said no, but then I came back later after listening to the band a little bit and go, hey, yeah, I could probably do a CD of this. And that's what I did. And that CD is out and it's reaching people, and I suspect that band will continue to grow and turn into something that one day would be able to have records, because you get other albums like this, the Vathana, the Commando, where in less than 5 years probably moved around 2,000 copies of that, which some people may be listening to this video, depending on what type of music you come from or what genre, go, well, that's low. Some people may come into it and go, well, that's high. For black metal, for the type of black metal that I primarily am involved with, that's 2,000 in less than 5 years is pretty high. That's multiple different editions, multiple different everything. And this segment, however, the Business Byte segment and this is where I wanted to start these last podcast, as I said. However, thanks to somebody getting all of their stuff seized by the authorities somewhere, we had to go into that, even though I've talked about that ad nauseum to death through the years, and nobody is interested in that. Nobody really. I mean, people are, but at the same time, that's not the type of tutorial I want to put out there. Now, this is designed, like I said, for people involved in black metal, underground, industrial electronic music, ambient, power electronics, that kind of stuff. Underground metal in general, depending on the level that you operate at. And there are other types of music that I am sure would fit into that, depending on what goes through the process to get that released. However, if you are in a band or something where you have contracts negotiated by lawyers and stuff, while there are probably principles in here that could help you, you might be a little more advanced. Okay, I started, as I said, almost 20 years ago, and if you were a black metal band at that time and asked for money in compensation for your work, oh, that guy's a poser, that guy's a traitor, get rid of him. Okay, yeah, that was what you got. And the reason you got that is because a lot of the companies and people around at that time didn't want to pay you. Didn't want to pay anybody. They wanted it to be the norm that the artist would accept free copies. And the logic was that they were supposed to be able to sell that, then be able to subsist off of the income from that, or have that be a bonus. Okay. That was 2007. times have changed since then. Everything has changed since then. The internet has changed a lot since then. And there's a little more to it than that. Yes, I have worked with people in both the United States and in other countries that just say, yes, we will pay the tax. We will take the free copies. Now, that's not applicable for everybody, and with larger record shipments, there's usually taxes involved in that, import taxes, shipping expenses, and so you can see where it gets a little kind of dicey. And before I go any further, if you are a band signed to one of those labels that talks garbage about me online or goes and causes a bunch of problems, or I otherwise don't like, and you go to them and say, hey, I want money, this video shut me out, I did that, I did that sitting in my bathrobe here in where I pack all the orders and stuff, and I did that, I totally screw with you. Now, with being paid, the main point I want to stress with this is you are not going to make a living off of doing this at any type of level where this video would be applicable. Yes, you can be in a pro band. Yes, you can tour. Yes, you can have management. Yes, you can go do all of that. But there's stuff that goes with that people hate. It takes a certain type of musician to be able to be on the road all the time. Corporate, all that stuff. And that life is not for everybody. The level with the amount of money that you can pretty much make off of, say, a black metal record or anything else like that is at the bare minimum going to be around maybe another paycheck or a bonus from your day job. People need to accept and understand that fact if they want to actually turn their band into something that could collect a royalty payment. Okay? And now that that's said, like for example, let's say you press 500 copies of something. You could, in theory, pay the band $500 and add about $1 onto each unit sold. Because at some point, it's, well, you got to pay the royalties to the band, and it impacts your customers. It either impacts the quality of the release or something, because you got to keep the cost down so that you can make money, or you have to raise your prices. And, you know, not everybody's going to pay $40 or $50 for one record by every band. So that's kind of around the dollar amounts that you could look into doing. I think 1,000 is on the high end. That's usually rather high. But it is possible to, use that as a starting point to negotiate something. But many of the reasons that bands aren't paid has nothing to do whatsoever with talent, any insider knowledge. If anything, the only reasons they're not paid is either laziness or just general lack of concern for music rights and communication with people about those types of things. All right. Now, when I say laziness, the best and easiest way to get your band paid and to make even more money than what I said, is to just press everything yourself and sell it yourself and consistently do all of that and have your own label. However, that's not applicable for everybody. There's not a lot of reach with all of that and everything else like that. Okay? Okay, because not everybody has the ability to do that for whatever reason, or the desire to do that, and some people may want to do that, but they may not have the reach. And then you can either pay or partner with larger entities or whatever you need to do to work all that, but most people just don't negotiate that. They don't want to do that work of packing the orders, of actually ordering and going through manufacturing and learning about all that stuff. And certain people don't want to do that. Or you get people that only do their little DIY editions, but demand circumvents that, and that's when other larger companies have to be involved. So, for the sake of this video, we're just going to assume going forward that for whatever reason, that circumstance is, for whatever reason, not applicable. Okay. Now, and that brings me to point 2. People's sheer lack of communication or otherwise just simply being inept. And I mean this in a positive. I don't mean this in a negative way. Let me kind of explain. Okay. From a label's perspective, unless somebody actually communicates that to me, I have no idea what people want. I have no idea what the bands want in terms of royalties or anything else. I really don't. Unless somebody goes and actually says, hey, I want to be paid for my music, I don't know. And that's why this video is, this is why this is so basic. And that's the point of these videos. Okay? Now, just asking to be paid isn't enough. Alright? And this is where things kind of get a little more complicated, but the same premise is basic. You have to communicate that you want to be paid. Okay, there was one guy that we worked with that didn't say anything, didn't do anything, and his idea of what he wanted was to just have somebody come and offer money to him so he could see how much other people thought it was worth. And in the process of doing that, he made several bad decisions that alienated myself and some of the other people that were working with him, or I think it was just me. And it's like, well, nobody knew this individual wanted to be paid. But there are certain people like that just want to just sit and wait for someone to come and offer that to them. Okay, that is not practical. That very rarely happens. And you have to be concerned or want to be interested in who would come and offer you something like that and why. It's like, why would someone come and offer a very, very high royalty payment? Well, there's probably a reason. Because there are bands that will, as I said, don't necessarily want to be paid, so what is the incentive for any label to do that? If anything, a label's going to go, okay, well, this band is asking for this amount of money. Do we go through with that or just say, hey, well, thanks for your time, you can go to another company? So that just sitting around waiting for somebody to pay you, that does not work. That process completely is that, yes, you may get something, but that is not this is not something. You need to be proactive on something like this and not reactive or just sitting in vegetating in a pool of your own narcissism. Okay, you're not physically writing the songs 24/7. So there's a time and a place for that. Okay, there's a time and a place for channeling your narcissism. Okay, but that's that. But so a band asks for money. That's not all you have to do, because obviously there's a little more to it than that, but the actual act, what you need to do is fairly basic. You need to ask for money, and then this is where things kind of get a little interesting. Because one, you have to realize that at that point you are then selling a product. And you have to have a product that somebody would pay money for. Which means people have to buy it. For starters. And if you factor in the amount of money that's being paid, you have to then factor in or account for what that money is going to go for. Okay? Because if you are a band and you are saying, hey, I want to be paid, you're likely going to have the recording mastered. And if you want to own the artwork, you're going to have to go and pay to have somebody make all of that themselves. Or get somebody to do that. So the money you collect back from the label could go towards basically covering those expenses, which is not that is a zero. That is basically that is just covering expenses. You didn't really make any income off of that. And if somebody requests, let's say, for me to pay them, well, first are we going to have to pay to have our people do the mastering? Are we going to have to pay for somebody to go and make artwork? Because before we can even zero in on a dollar amount that the band would get paid, we have to know what that's going to cost. Because otherwise you get a product that's too expensive. So that first hurdle, so you've asked for money. You make sure you have a product that you can get paid for, because there's a lot of great bands out there also that no one buys. And so then you're paying to just store everything. Okay? So those two things aside, now you come to the third thing. The mechanics of accepting a payment. You have to be alert, and you have to not be a scumbag. Like, I'm not going to pay somebody that's a total scumbag. I'm not. That's just me. I don't have to do that. I don't need to do that. Somebody else can go and deal with that if they want to. However, somebody who, let's just say they're a junkie and on drugs. We're just going to go with that. People like that usually try to come back after the release is already physically existing and wanting to get paid. Or people who are inexperienced or inept or otherwise are not on the pulse. They come and then they try to collect a payment. You cannot come and collect a royalty payment after the fact. Because then, and if you go complain about the label online, the label's going to just go, that was never discussed before and we didn't know we needed to do that. Had we known we needed to do that, we would not have released it. And yes, there are companies that'll come in and redo it, and then that label is out, whatever, that's already a loss for them. Byte. All of that drama could have been avoided by the band asking up front. And I don't mean after it's ready to go to the pressing plant, I mean before everything is finalized. You go to a label and say, hey, I want you to release, let's just say, our album onto CD. The label goes, okay, I'm interested. Can I listen to it? The label listens to it and then says, yes, I will. Then at that point in that process where the label says they're interested enough to consider it, at that point in the process is when you discuss either how much you get paid, how many copies you receive, or any specific requests that you have. At that point. If pre-production work has already begun, people are already doing layouts or whatever, you're kind of lost. That's pretty much SOL. Yeah, you can come back and renegotiate, but a lot of people won't. And if let's say for example, I already did layouts for something and somebody comes back and asks for money, and we go, well, we're not going to pay for this. The release is canceled. then I can turn around and bill them for my time for the graphics and everything else. And there are people that will do that. And it is perfectly reasonable to do that because you wasted somebody's time and you expended their resources. There's no black metal ideological principle that prevents that. That's just more people being incompetent. Okay, so let's say you have all of those things resolved. You've asked for your payment at the right time. You have the ability to collect it properly. And then you agree on a payment. And you agree on all the terms and everything. There's one last little hurdle that has to kind of be resolved. And that is, who has rights to the music has to be properly resolved. Now, if this is a one-man operation, a one-man band or something, that really, is just you. But let's say you're a band, you have multiple people. Everybody's got to get paid. Some amount relative to whatever they contributed. Who owns what has to be established. Were the people actually in the band, or were they designated as session musicians? Because there's a key difference. A person who's in the band would be entitled to whatever the band benefits. However, a session guy, that is basically a one and done deal where whoever commissioned that owns that piece of music. Like if you have a session drummer and they go and they record drum tracks for you and you compensate them for that, you own those drum tracks. That's how that works. Okay, but if they're in a band and they decide on their own, I want to write and record this for this song, if they don't feel they're properly compensated, they can go, well, that's my music, I can go reuse that for something else. You hear a lot of these recordings or whatever that can't get released because of a conflict between members, and a lot of that comes from people not knowing who did what and know how to solve all that. So that has to be ironed out, and that's kind of part of making sure that you're in a condition to accept payment. The main thing you have to do, obviously, is ask for it. That's the main thing. Anything else doesn't work, because, as I say, you have to ask for it at the right time. And if you are one of the bands that I currently am working with that are watching this video and that's fine, want to renegotiate or something. Some people will do that, some people won't, though. But I will state that if you go and renegotiate and everybody goes, well, we've heard your proposal, we're going to keep the original agreement that we made, you are expected to honor that. And that's that. So that kind of covers the mechanics of it. And then the part 2 of this video is you need to turn your band into something that can get paid. And what that means is you have to make a product that consumers will buy. And most black metal bands don't think about this. They don't care about this. They don't even care if it's actually out there. And if you're a black metal band like that, where you just don't even care what happens, you got it recorded and that's where your care level stops, you are never going to get paid if that is something that you want. Okay, you can't have both. You either have to not get paid, go, well, anyway, I have had one person that we had returned money we paid them, like 400, 500 euros worth, which for that band was a lot, because they couldn't handle the responsibility of being paid. They couldn't handle the fact that they were paid. So you have to accept that may not be for you and adjust your band accordingly. Or you have to go, okay, I want to get paid. I need to kind of change my behavior a little bit. So that's the main thing. And then obviously, if you're some band that has a bunch of releases or something like that, or it's all just stuff that doesn't make sense on a physical format or can't get done or whatever, there's disputes over who owns it, or you rip everybody off, or you're controversial, or you have a bad reputation, or whatever, or where you can't get whatever product you have the ability to produce, is not something that is viable to large numbers of people where they could, let's say, press a lot, you're probably not going to get paid. And and if you already have a band, let's say you have a band that it's all like what I said, where it's just a mess, or the easiest way to determine if your band is in a position or not is to go, would I, as a consumer, buy and follow this band's work? And what would it entail for me to do that? You need to ask yourself the first question, and then some people go, well, if it's good, I would buy it. Okay. And that's why I say you have to follow the band's entire catalog of work, because most customers, most consumers, they want to own a band's entire discography. They want to collect everything, and you have to ask yourself then, what would it take to do that? If you have your own little niche audience or whatever in some country somewhere, and if that's the best you're ever going to do, then you may want to say, okay, we need to just either keep this project as our fun project to do whatever we want with, or just say we've done everything with this band, at that point it's a brand, has achieved all that it is capable of achieving. We are going to either split it up or formally change the name and then have a new brand and basically start over and do everything correctly, where there's not a ton of releases, and what you have is a viable product with the goal of getting paid. So that, and if you can't figure out as a band how to do that, that's something that you try to ask for advice on from either other bands or labels that are willing to offer advice that you don't necessarily have direct business interests with, and stuff like that. And so those issues aside, and there's two other things with getting paid that I want to briefly talk about or discuss. As I said earlier, there was an individual who couldn't understand the responsibility of getting paid. And that is that you need to have a viable product, and that you need to have a product that is not, necessarily, you have to be able to handle that responsibility with it and make sure that everything is properly managed so that you have something that people would want to pay for. You have to actually conduct yourself with integrity. Because as I said before, I'm not going to go pay some scumbag somewhere. If I think you're a scumbag, I'm not going to pay you. Period. End of sentence. I don't have to. And you have to understand that it's not necessarily, a label doesn't have to pay you. That is not something that a label has to do. They have to voluntarily decide that they want to pay you. And that means you have to conduct yourself professionally. That means you have to honor your word, you have to honor your commitments, and you have to behave with proper character and integrity. That is crucial to getting paid. That's anything else with life, because it's the same with a job. You show up to work drunk or something, not on time, your employer may go, we're going to pay somebody else to do your function. Your services are no longer needed. Okay, so that's the main thing. You have to conduct yourself with integrity. And then the second thing is, and these are all basic things. We're not even talking dollar amount or whether a label should pay or anything. We're just saying basic. This is basic principles. We are at a basic level 0, and that is you need to ask to get paid. You got to have something that people would pay for. You got to conduct yourself responsibly. And this is the fourth thing. You have to understand and be accepting of the fact that there are strings attached with getting paid. And you will notice that just because we're talking about music here, these are general facts of life. Okay? And now, what every label requests in return for getting paid is probably different. Some may not request anything. And they'll get ripped off, and then that's going to change. They'll eventually get ripped off, and that'll change. But you have to understand that there are strings attached with that. And before you accept a payment and while you're during the negotiation, you should probably figure out what those things are and make sure you're either capable of meeting them or are interested in meeting them. Okay? The main thing a label, and if it's over, okay, a certain dollar amount, or depending on what the label has to do, they may go, that's fine. We'll pay you. We'll pay you what you're requesting. In return, we own the recording. Because I had a band cost me over $1,000. And I own that now. That's what happened with that. And it's perfectly reasonable for a label or an institution to say that. Okay? Perfectly reasonable. And you have to also understand that it's a privilege. Because, you can pay somebody and then it just fall flat, not sell, monetary loss, zero interest, anything like that. And the label go, well, we're not going to pay anymore. You either need to go out and improve or or we're not going to pay you. And that getting paid as an artist or something may not be all that it's cracked up to be, because there are people that think, oh, well, I can just go get paid for doing all this, and it doesn't do anything. Because let's say, for example, we had somebody who we paid, who returned money, and I said as a concession for being paid, you need to stop taking offers for every single label that's out there with these 20 editions of CDRs and recycling the same songs over and over and just generally going around not wanting to tell people no because you don't set boundaries and you just want to be as prolific as possible. You need to be, conduct yourself soberly and sedately, and you need to go work with the people that we need you to work with or communicate to us that you can't do that. Like, there was a guy that we paid, he returned money because I said, you need to do this in return. They couldn't do that. He couldn't do that. He couldn't also wait patiently for his stuff to get done, because that takes a while. Too many releases takes a while, that type of thing. And also, he couldn't work with the people involved with mixing and mastering his music because of his grasp of the language barrier. And he needed to say, hey, in order to be able to get through this, you are going to have to go find an engineer that can speak fluently the language that I speak, or these languages that is not English. And then you need to, because what we got out of that was not something that was a financial win, mostly because of problems with the mastering technician, who I subsequently had to stop paying for their services. But you get into some mess like that where people are losing money, you're not going to get paid. The label's just going to say, hey, we're not going to pay you. And if you make an agreement with a label and they pay you, there's a few other points to this I want to make. One, first and foremost, when you should receive your royalty payment is not up front. Everybody wants it up front, and idiots do that up front. That's what I did. We paid people up front, and then we get stuff that never gets turned in, and then you have to recollect the money. When you collect a payment, when they should pay you, is one of two times, depending on how it is negotiated. If you are just requesting a flat, reasonable sum, they should pay the pressing plant and pay you at the same time. So that everything is go, there's no going back at this point, it's done. And then you're just waiting for your artist copies, and then that's that. Or, if you are requesting royalties rather than a flat rate, so you want to be paid something from the sales of the album, that you would have to pay, obviously, after the label does all of that. I will state that in this day and age, that is increasingly not viable, and if you are a band looking for that type of agreement specifically, you should probably reevaluate that and try to just negotiate a flat fee for either rates, and that's more of a licensing thing. And and generally speaking, if somebody pays you, they are the ones who exclusively get to work on that. You don't need to go collect multiple different payments from multiple different labels for the same album at the same time, because there are people that do that, and then you just get all this oversaturated stuff that's not necessarily probable. And then if a label does not pay you, does not meet their obligations, then and only then do you have the ability to say, hey, we entered into an agreement with this label, they did not fulfill their bargain, or they did not fulfill their half of their agreements, we weren't properly paid, or whatever. Then you can have another company go and redo it. However, not being happy with some detail with the product is not necessarily the best solution, because a lot of those things are things that can be worked out after the fact. But again, if you will not collect as much money if somebody is paying to redo everything, because even if stuff is considered a bootleg nowadays, people still buy it. I mean, that's just at this level. There's no legal injunctions. There's no, all the dollar amounts and quantities that we're dealing with aren't necessarily something for courts to resolve. So, yeah, you may get a company to redo that, but that would basically be a Pyrrhic victory. Because, yeah, you may be able to hold in your hands a version that you're happy with, but there's all this other stuff that's sitting as dead stock somewhere that's going to be recycled, and that those institutions are not happy with you. And word of those bands and people gets around, by the way, that do stuff like that, even if it's all not, it's discreetly handled privately on the internet, because there is one person that I know, a label that we do a lot of business with, had somebody come back after the fact and say, hey, I wanted to get paid, and didn't do anything, and then somebody, paid to have somebody redo all of that all over again. That band, nobody's going to work with that band in the long term once the deal that they currently have probably runs out. And that's the type of stuff that you get into with getting paid. And I know for certain a lot of the bands out there aren't paid. And that's that. And there was one other thing that I forgot, as we're almost at 40 minutes. There is another type of payment that a band can request. And that is a flat payment, similar to, basically being paid a flat fee for the recording, in lieu of artist copies. Like, standard artist copies are 15%. That's what's standard. That seems to be of the quantity pressed for black metal. But you can go, hey, we don't necessarily have the ability to remove or receive all of that. Can we work out a price? And that is most commonly how I actually pay bands. Is we don't need that many, because I like to press a lot. I feel that we can actually move a lot, despite how it may appear. But, you can collect payment for that. You can also, but that kind of has to be negotiated between you and the label. And generally, many times, you're not going to get paid what you would be able to make by selling that. Depends, again, on the label. And then another type of payment a band can collect is reimbursement for expenses. And this can go a variety of different ways. Let's say you're in a band and you have a member or somebody who is obstructing everything, and you and the band can decide to buy out that individual's contributions, buy out that individual's involvement, and just go, here's money for your time and effort. You need to go away, and then we're going to use your contributions. And if if that can't be settled that way, then somebody obviously would have to go re-record that, and that could be, get a session guy, stuff like that, or reimbursement for expenses could be requested by bands from labels. However, generally there would be strings attached. Like, for example, if you want your mastering studio to do it, we're probably not going to pay for that, because we have our own people that can do that stuff. Same with artwork and commissions. So that is about 40 minutes about how black metal bands that are not necessarily, underground black metal bands can collect money, or underground metal bands or underground bands can collect money for their work. That's about 40 minutes of it. If there are any feedback, if there is any feedback, I'll obviously do a second video on this or expand on these things more. But that is that. And as I said before, Winter Solace, my label is not going to be held liable for any deals or whatever that you do or can't get or whatever. And, you know, that's that. But I feel that this knowledge should be out there for bands, or this resource to have, so that these people can know to request these things. Because a lot of these, the reason these people aren't getting paid or are going and taking money from people that are completely just unscrupulous human garbage, are because they simply don't even know that these are things they can ask for and stuff like that. So I want to thank everybody for tuning into this. This has been the Winter Solace Productions Business Byte from our podcast, slated for release in February of 2025.